Marcus Chun pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the ventilation shaft, feeling the warm blood seeping through his tactical vest. The plasma burn across his ribs sent waves of pain through his body with each breath, but he had endured worse during the siege of New Shanghai. His sniper rifle, a modified Barrett M82 that had served him through 12 campaigns, lay cradled in his arms like a sleeping child. The Zephyrian Empire had made their first mistake 3 days ago when they assumed all humans on Kepler 442b were dead. Their second mistake was leaving him alive after their orbital bombardment. Now, as their purple-skinned soldiers marched through the smoking ruins of New Geneva Colony, they were about to make their third and final mistake. Through the grate beneath him, Marcus watched a squad of Zephyrian shock troops methodically executing the wounded colonists they found in the medical bay. Their elongated skulls and forearms made them appear almost graceful as they worked, but there was nothing graceful about the way they pulled the trigger on their plasma rifles. Each burst of superheated energy turned human flesh to ash in seconds. Marcus had been tracking this particular unit for 18 hours. Captain Vexthal, identifiable by the golden neural implants protruding from his skull, commanded 12 elite soldiers. They had been responsible for the massacre at the school, where 300 children had been hiding in the underground shelter. The Zephyrians had pumped poison gas into the ventilation system and waited for the screaming to stop. The sniper shifted his weight carefully, ignoring the protest from his wounded ribs. The Empire controlled 17 star systems and commanded fleets that could glass entire planets from orbit. They had been expanding across the galaxy for over 2 centuries, crushing every species that stood in their way. Humans had been the latest addition to their growing list of extinct civilizations. What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that humans were different from the other species they had conquered. The Altarians had surrendered after losing their homeworld. The crystalline Zarathi had simply dissolved into their component minerals when faced with extinction. But humans had a peculiar trait that had evolved during millions of years of surviving on a death world called Earth. They got angry. Marcus Chun had been getting angry for 3 days now. The tactical display on his rifle's scope showed the heat signatures of the Zephyrian patrol moving through the medical facility below. Standard doctrine would have been to wait for backup, coordinate with other human resistance cells, and plan a strategic strike. But there were no other resistance cells left. The orbital bombardment had been thorough, and the follow-up ground assault had been even more precise. Every military installation, every communication hub, every government building had been reduced to radioactive glass. The Empire had studied human military tactics for months before the invasion. They had intercepted communications, analyzed battle strategies, and prepared countermeasures for every conventional human weapon system. What they hadn't prepared for was a single wounded sniper with nothing left to lose, and a very particular set of skills. Captain Vexthal raised one of his forearms to signal his squad to halt. His enhanced hearing had detected something in the ventilation system above them. The Zephyrian neural implants could process acoustic data far beyond human capability, but they were calibrated for their own species. The subtle sound of human breathing in a confined space fell outside their normal parameters. Marcus held his breath and counted heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. The Zephyrian captain tilted his elongated head, listening. 4, 5, 6. The alien's hand moved toward his sidearm. 7, 8, 9. Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose and steadied his rifle. The first shot took Captain Vexthal in the center of his skull, the depleted uranium round punching through his neural implants and spreading them across the wall behind him. Before the echo of the gunshot had faded, Marcus had already shifted targets. The second shot caught the squad's communications officer as he reached for his equipment. The third shot silenced the medic who was diving for cover behind an overturned hospital bed. Plasma fire erupted from below as the remaining Zephyrians tried to locate their attacker. The superheated bolts melted through the ventilation grating, filling the shaft with toxic smoke. Marcus rolled to his left, ignoring the fire that spread across his back from the plasma burns. His fourth shot punched through the chest armor of a Zephyrian sergeant who had taken position behind a medical scanner. The aliens were trained to fight in formation, to rely on their superior technology and coordinated tactics. They were not trained to deal with a ghost that fired from impossible angles and disappeared before they could return fire. Marcus had spent 2 years fighting insurgents in the jungles of Proxima Centauri B, where human rebels had learned to turn their environment into a weapon. The Zephyrians were about to receive a very painful education. He dropped through a maintenance hatch into a supply closet, his boots silent on the rubberized floor. The sound of Zephyrian voices echoed through the corridor as they tried to coordinate their response. Their language was all clicks and whistles, like angry dolphins trying to communicate through broken sonar. Marcus had learned enough during his captivity to understand their basic tactical terminology. They were calling for backup. The sniper smiled for the first time in 3 days. Let them call. Let them bring their entire garrison. He had nowhere else to be, and he had plenty of ammunition. Moving through the shadows of the ruined medical facility, Marcus began to understand why the Zephyrian Empire had been so successful in their galactic conquest. They were methodical, efficient, and ruthlessly logical. They studied their enemies, identified their weaknesses, and applied overwhelming force at the precise moment it would cause maximum damage. It was a strategy that had worked against every species they had encountered. But the Zephyrians had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed that humans would behave rationally when faced with extinction. They had calculated that the survivors would surrender or flee when confronted with impossible odds. Their xenobiologists had concluded that human morale would collapse once their command structure was eliminated and their population centers were destroyed. They had not accounted for the fact that humans had been apex predators long before they reached the stars. They had not considered that a species which had survived ice ages, plagues, and countless wars might respond to genocide not with despair, but with fury. Marcus Chun had been fury incarnate for 72 hours now, and he was just getting started. The sound of approaching aircraft filled the air outside the medical facility. Heavy transport ships were landing in the plaza, disgorging fresh troops to deal with the terrorist incident in Sector 7. Marcus counted the heat signatures through his thermal scope. 48 soldiers, 2 light mechs, and a command vehicle with enhanced communication equipment. The Empire was taking him seriously now. He made his way to the facility's upper floors, where the structural damage from the orbital bombardment had created perfect sniper nests among the twisted metal and collapsed concrete. From his new position, Marcus could see the entire plaza. The Zephyrian troops were establishing a perimeter, their plasma rifles sweeping the surrounding buildings for any sign of human activity. They moved with practiced efficiency, these soldiers of the Empire. Their equipment was top tier, their training was extensive, and their coordination was flawless. Under normal circumstances, a single human sniper would have been neutralized within minutes of engaging such a force. But these were not normal circumstances, and Marcus Chun was not a normal sniper. The first Zephyrian to die in the plaza never knew what hit him. The bullet traveled nearly 2 kilometers from Marcus's position, passing through 3 different buildings before finding its target. The alien soldier simply crumpled to the ground, his 4 arms sprawling at impossible angles as purple blood pooled beneath his body. Chaos erupted in the plaza as the Zephyrian forces tried to locate the shooter. Their thermal scanners swept the surrounding buildings, but Marcus had learned to mask his heat signature using techniques developed by human special forces on a dozen different worlds. To their sensors, he was just another piece of cooling debris in a city full of wreckage. The second shot came from a completely different angle, punching through the armored cockpit of one of the light mechs. The machine stumbled and crashed into a fountain, its pilot's death scream echoing through the plaza's communication system. The third shot disabled the command vehicle's antenna array, cutting off the Zephyrian unit from their orbital support. Colonel Zarketh, the commanding officer of the garrison, watched his soldiers scramble for cover as invisible death picked them off one by one. In 40 years of military service across 17 star systems, he had never encountered anything like this. The human was fighting like a madman, with no regard for tactics or self-preservation. Every shot was impossibly accurate. Every position was perfectly concealed. Every attack came from a direction his troops weren't watching. It was as if the human had turned the entire ruined city into a single massive weapon, and he was the finger on the trigger. As the sun set over New Geneva Colony, painting the sky in shades of red that matched the blood on the streets below, Marcus Chun settled into his position for a long night of work. His wound had stopped bleeding, his ammunition was carefully rationed, and his targets were multiplying with each passing hour. The Galactic Empire had conquered 17 star systems by being smarter, stronger, and more ruthless than their enemies. Tonight, they were about to learn that sometimes being human was enough. The emergency meeting of the Zephyrian High Command took place aboard the flagship Dominion's Edge, in orbit above Kepler 442b. Admiral HFY Sci-Fi stood before a holographic display showing casualty reports that defied all military logic. In 18 hours, a single human had eliminated 47 elite soldiers, destroyed 6 vehicles, and crippled an entire garrison's operational capacity. General Vexmore, the Empire's most decorated ground commander, studied the tactical analysis with growing disbelief. Each attack had been surgically precise, targeting officers, communications equipment, and key personnel with an accuracy that suggested intimate knowledge of Zephyrian military doctrine. The human wasn't just killing their soldiers. He was systematically dismantling their command structure one bullet at a time. How is this possible? Admiral Tchasarun's voice carried the harmonics of barely controlled rage. Our forces have conquered entire civilizations. We have weapons that can level continents. How has one wounded human managed to turn our most elite units into scattered, frightened prey? Dr. Kethanis, the Empire's chief xenobiologist, manipulated the holographic display to show a three-dimensional map of the humans' movements. We underestimated their psychological makeup, Admiral. Our previous encounters with humans suggested they were technologically inferior, but tactically predictable. This individual is demonstrating patterns we've never observed in any species. The map showed a web of interconnected attack positions throughout New Geneva Colony. Each strike had been planned with mathematical precision, taking advantage of sight lines, structural weaknesses, and blind spots that even their most advanced scanning equipment had missed. The human was fighting like a ghost that could appear anywhere and strike from everywhere. Colonel Zarketh, his uniform still stained with the dust and blood from the plaza engagement, pointed to a cluster of red indicators on the display. He's not following standard guerrilla tactics. Normally, an isolated sniper would either seek extraction or establish a defensive position. This human is actively hunting us. He's treating our entire force as his personal target range. Down on the planet's surface, Marcus Chin moved through the ruins of what had once been New Geneva's financial district. The orbital bombardment had turned the gleaming towers into a maze of twisted metal and shattered concrete, creating perfect urban warfare terrain. His sniper rifle had been supplemented with weapons recovered from dead Zephyrian soldiers, their plasma rifles surprisingly ergonomic despite being designed for four-armed users. The blood loss was starting to affect his coordination, but Marcus had learned to function with worse injuries during the guerrilla campaigns on Tau Ceti. Pain was just another piece of information to be processed and filed away. Right now, the only information that mattered was the movement pattern of the Zephyrian search teams combing through the city looking for him. They had divided their forces into 12-member squads, each one equipped with advanced sensors and heavy weapons. It was a textbook response to a sniper threat, designed to provide overlapping fields of fire while maintaining communication with orbital support. The Zephyrians had clearly studied human military tactics extensively. Unfortunately for them, Marcus had been studying Zephyrian tactics for the past 3 months while planning the colony's defense. He knew their standard operating procedures, their communication protocols, and, most importantly, their weaknesses. The first weakness was their reliance on technology. Zephyrian soldiers were equipped with neural implants that provided enhanced sensory input and tactical coordination. But the implants operated on specific frequency ranges, and Marcus had recovered enough equipment from dead aliens to understand their signal patterns. The improvised electromagnetic pulse device he had constructed from medical equipment and Zephyrian power cells would only work once, but once might be enough. Squad leader Nexvarin led his team through the ruins of the banking complex, their sensors sweeping for any trace of human biosignatures. The neural implants in his skull processed tactical data from his 11 subordinates, creating a three-dimensional map of their surroundings that updated in real time. According to orbital intelligence, the human terrorist was somewhere within a 6-block radius. The EMP pulse hit them without warning. 12 Zephyrian soldiers suddenly, found themselves blind, deaf, and disconnected from their tactical network. Their neural implants sparked and died, leaving them with only their natural senses in an environment designed by a predator who understood exactly how helpless they had become. Marcus opened fire from 3 different positions in rapid succession, his shots echoing through the concrete canyons as he moved between pre-positioned firing points. The Zephyrians stumbled and fired wildly, their plasma rifles cutting through empty air while death picked them off with methodical precision. Squad leader Nexverin lived long enough to understand what was happening. The human hadn't just disabled their technology, he had turned their greatest advantage into a critical vulnerability. The Zephyrian Empire's military doctrine was built around technological superiority and networked combat systems. Without their implants, they were just confused aliens stumbling through a maze designed by someone who knew exactly where they were going. The sniper's 11th shot caught Nexverin in the chest as he tried to reach his emergency beacon. His last thought was a dawning realization of how completely they had misunderstood their enemy. High above the planet, the tactical situation aboard Dominion's Edge was deteriorating rapidly. Admiral HFY Sci-Fi watched the life signs of another squad disappear from the monitoring display, their neural implants going dark in sequence like candles being snuffed out by an invisible wind. "He's learning," General Vexmore observed grimly. "Each engagement shows improved understanding of our equipment and tactics. This isn't random violence. This is systematic dismantling of our operational capacity." Dr. Kethanese brought up a psychological profile on the main display. "I've been analyzing the attack patterns, and I believe I understand what we're dealing with. This human isn't fighting to escape or even to survive. He's fighting to teach us a lesson." Admiral Tishasesaroon's forearms gestured impatiently. What kind of lesson could one primitive human possibly teach the Galactic Empire? The xenobiologist highlighted a series of data points showing the progression of attacks. "He's demonstrating that our technological advantages are meaningless against an enemy who understands our weaknesses better than we do. Every engagement has been designed to expose a different vulnerability in our doctrine." The holographic display shifted to show a detailed breakdown of the human's choice of targets. Officers, communication specialists, technical personnel, heavy weapons operators. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. "He's not just killing our soldiers," Dr. Kethanese continued. "He's surgically removing our ability to function as a coordinated military force. Each death degrades our operational capacity in ways that pure casualty numbers don't reflect." Marcus Chun had discovered something that 17 conquered civilizations had failed to understand. The Zephyrian Empire's strength came from their ability to coordinate massive technological resources through their neural network systems. But that same interconnectedness created vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone who understood how to turn their strengths against them. As night fell over New Geneva Colony, Marcus prepared for the next phase of his campaign. The Zephyrians were adapting to his tactics, bringing in specialized equipment, and changing their operational patterns. It was time to show them that humans were also capable of adaptation. The colony's fusion reactor had been damaged but not destroyed in the orbital bombardment. Marcus had spent his first night after the massacre rigging the facility with improvised explosives and signal boosters. Now, as Zephyrian reinforcements landed in the colony's main spaceport, he activated the devices he had planted throughout the reactor complex. The explosion wasn't large enough to destroy the city, but it was perfectly positioned to create an electromagnetic pulse that would disable every piece of Zephyrian technology within a 50-kilometer radius. Ships fell from the sky like dying birds. Ground vehicles stopped functioning. Communication networks went silent. In the space of 30 seconds, Marcus Chun had reduced the most advanced military force in the galaxy to a collection of confused aliens armed with clubs and harsh language. The human sniper watched the chaos from his position atop the colony's central tower, his rifle steady despite the exhaustion that pulled at his consciousness. The wound in his side had reopened during the climb, and he could feel his strength ebbing with each drop of blood that fell to the rooftop below. But he could also see the results of his work spreading across the landscape like a wave of poetic justice. Zephyrian soldiers stumbled through the darkness, their advanced weapons useless, their coordination shattered. The empire that had conquered 17 star systems through technological superiority was about to learn how their victims had felt when the lights went out forever. Marcus chambered another round and settled into a comfortable shooting position. He had enough ammunition for maybe 200 more shots, and there were at least 3,000 Zephyrians scattered across the colony. The mathematics were not in his favor. But then, again, mathematics had never been humanity's strongest suit. They had always preferred to rely on more primitive calculations, like how much pain they could inflict before someone learned to leave them alone. As the first confused Zephyrian soldiers began to organize themselves in the plaza below, Marcus Chin smiled and adjusted his scope. Class was still in session, and he had so much more to teach them about the price of underestimating the human spirit. The Galactic Empire was about to receive a lesson in applied human studies that they would remember for the rest of their significantly shortened existence. Admiral HFY Sci-Fi stood in the emergency command center that had been hastily established in the mountains outside New Geneva colony. The electromagnetic pulse had crippled their orbital support and grounded most of their aircraft, forcing the Zephyrian leadership to relocate to a hardened facility that predated their invasion. The irony that they were now hiding in a bunker built by the humans they had tried to exterminate was not lost on anyone present. General Vexmore studied the tactical displays powered by backup generators, his forearms moving in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. We've lost contact with 7 more squads. The human is moving faster now, striking multiple targets simultaneously. It's as if he's everywhere at once. Dr. Kethanese looked up from her analysis console, her elongated skull marked by the stress lines that appeared when Zephyrians faced incomprehensible situations. I believe I understand what's happening. The electromagnetic pulse didn't just disable our equipment. It forced us to fight on his terms. The main display showed a map of New Geneva colony marked with red indicators where Zephyrian forces had been engaged and eliminated. The pattern looked less like military casualties and more like the work of a natural disaster, as if death itself had taken physical form and was methodically working its way through their ranks. Explain, Admiral HFY Sci-Fi demanded. Dr. Kethanese manipulated the holographic display to show a timeline of human behavior throughout galactic history. Every species we've encountered has had some form of pack structure, hierarchy, or social organization that could be disrupted through targeted elimination of leadership. Humans are different. When isolated, they don't become weaker. They become more dangerous. She highlighted a series of historical incidents from human military records. They call it going postal or berserker rage. When a human is pushed beyond their psychological breaking point and stripped of everything they care about, they enter a state where normal survival instincts are replaced by pure destructive intent. Down in the ruins of the colony, Marcus Chun had transcended pain, exhaustion, and the normal limitations of human physiology. The wound in his side had stopped bleeding because there wasn't enough blood left to bleed. His vision flickered in and out of focus, but his hands remained steady on his rifle. He had moved beyond the need for conscious thought, operating on instincts that had been honed by millions of years of human evolution. He was no longer Marcus Chun, the sniper. He was Marcus Chun, the apex predator, and he had found his hunting ground. The Zephyrians had made the mistake of trying to hunt him using their traditional tactics. They moved in formation, communicated through standard protocols, and followed predictable patrol patterns. Marcus had spent the last 6 hours teaching them why those tactics didn't work against an enemy who had nothing left to lose and unlimited motivation to kill. The abandoned shopping complex provided perfect cover for his current operation. The Zephyrians had established a supply depot in the central plaza, thinking the open space would prevent sniper attacks. They had not considered that a human might be willing to get close enough to touch their enemies before killing them. Marcus moved through the ventilation systems like a ghost, his modified combat knife silent against Zephyrian flesh. The aliens' forearms and enhanced strength meant nothing in the confined spaces where Marcus chose to engage them. One by one, the guards around the supply depot simply vanished, their bodies hidden in maintenance shafts and supply closets. By the time the Zephyrians realized what was happening, Marcus had already rigged their ammunition stores with improvised explosives. The detonation lit up the night sky and sent shockwaves through every Zephyrian position within 10 kilometers. But, more importantly, it sent a message that was received loud and clear by every alien soldier on the planet. The human wasn't just fighting them. He was hunting them. Colonel Zarketh received the report of the supply depot's destruction while coordinating the search for the human terrorist from his mobile command post. The numbers were becoming impossible to explain to his superiors. One wounded human had now eliminated over 200 Zephyrian soldiers and destroyed millions of credits worth of military equipment. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human." The command post fell silent. In 3 days of warfare, the human had never attempted communication. He had simply killed everything that moved and disappeared back into the ruins like a malevolent spirit. "Put it through," Zarketh ordered. Marcus Chin's voice came through the speakers with a calm clarity that was somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. "Colonel Zarketh, I know you can hear me. I've been studying your communication patterns." The Zephyrian colonel's throat sacs inflated with alarm. The human knew his name, had been studying their protocols. The implications were staggering. "I want you to send a message to your admiral," Marcus continued. "Tell him that I'm not finished. Tell him that every human you killed had a name, had a family, had dreams that you turned to ash. Tell him that Marcus Chun remembers all of them." The transmission cut off, leaving the command post in stunned silence. Colonel Zarketh stared at the communication equipment as if it might provide some explanation for what he had just heard. The human hadn't made demands, hadn't negotiated, hadn't even threatened them directly. He had simply announced that he remembered. Dr. Kethanis received the recording of the transmission while analyzing psychological profiles in the emergency command center. As she listened to the human's calm, measured words, a new understanding began to form in her mind. She had been approaching the problem from the wrong direction, trying to understand the human's tactical motivations when she should have been examining his emotional state. "Admiral," she called urgently, "I need to speak with you immediately." Admiral Thys Arun approached the xenobiologist station with the measured gait of someone who had received too much bad news in too short a time. "What have you discovered, Doctor?" Dr. Kethanis brought up a new analysis on her display, this one focused on human psychological patterns rather than military tactics. "We've been treating this as a military engagement, but it's not. This human isn't fighting a war. He's conducting a religious ceremony." The Admiral's neural implants flickered with confusion. "Explain." "Humans have a concept called justice that goes beyond simple revenge or tactical advantage," Dr. Kethanis explained. "When they believe a great wrong has been committed, some individuals will sacrifice everything to balance the scales. This human isn't trying to win. He's trying to teach us the consequences of our actions." She highlighted specific patterns in the attack data. "Look at his target selection. He's not trying to capture territory or disrupt our strategic objectives. He's eliminating our personnel in direct proportion to the human casualties we inflicted. Mathematical justice." Admiral Thys Arun studied the data with growing understanding and fear. "You're saying he's trying to kill exactly as many of us as we killed of them?" "I'm saying he's already succeeded," Dr. Kethanis replied quietly. "According to my calculations, his current kill count matches the number of human civilians we eliminated during the initial bombardment and ground assault. But that's not the end of his equation." The xenobiologist brought up population data for New Geneva Colony. "There were 47,000 humans on this planet when we arrived. He's not going to stop until he's balanced the scales completely." The implications hit Admiral Thys Arun like a physical blow. The human wasn't just seeking revenge. He was conducting a census, and every Zephyrian life was being weighed against every human death. High above the planet, emergency discussions were taking place aboard what remained of the Zephyrian fleet. The electromagnetic pulse had damaged but not completely disabled their orbital platforms, and Admiral Thys Arun faced a decision that would define the Empire's future relationship with humanity. "We could glass the entire planet," General Vexmore suggested. "Complete orbital bombardment. Turn the surface into molten rock. The human can't survive that." "And then what?" Admiral Thys Arun asked. "We've already sent reports back to the Empire about the successful pacification of this system. If we glass the planet now, it will raise questions about what went wrong." Dr. Kethanis looked up from her calculations. "There's another problem. Our xenobiological surveys of human space indicate there are over 50 billion humans spread across 47 star systems. If word of this massacre spreads, If they learn what we're capable of when we decide to eliminate a species. The thought hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 17 civilizations by being more ruthless than their enemies. But they had never faced an enemy that might be more ruthless than they were. Down on the planet's surface, Marcus Chin moved through the night like death given form. His body was failing, held together by willpower and medical stimulants scavenged from Zephyrian first aid kits. But his mind remained focused on the equation that drove him forward. 47,000 human lives. 47,000 Zephyrian deaths required to balance the scales. He had 1,400 rounds of ammunition left, scattered across cache points throughout the city. The Zephyrians had approximately 8,000 soldiers remaining on the planet, with more arriving every few hours as reinforcements landed outside the electromagnetic pulse zone. The mathematics were still not in his favor, but Marcus had learned something during his 72 hours of continuous combat. Mathematics was just another system that could be manipulated by someone who understood the underlying principles. As dawn broke over New Geneva Colony, painting the sky in shades of red that matched the blood on the streets below, Marcus Chin prepared for the final phase of his mission. The Zephyrians were learning to fear the dark, huddling in their fortified positions and jumping at shadows. But Marcus had one more lesson to teach them about the true nature of human warfare. If you hurt a human's family, they would hurt you back. If you killed a human's friends, they would kill you in return. But if you exterminated every human a soldier had ever cared about, you didn't get an enemy. You got a force of nature. The Galactic Empire was about to learn that some mistakes could never be corrected, only survived. And Marcus Chun was going to make sure that survival came at a price they would remember for the rest of their civilization. The wounded human sniper settled into his final position atop the colony's communication tower, his rifle trained on the Zephyrian command bunker 8 kilometers away. Through his scope, he could see Admiral HFY Sci-Fi standing at an observation window, probably thinking he was safe behind meters of reinforced alien steel. Marcus Chin smiled and adjusted for wind speed and gravitational drop. Class was almost over, but he still had one more lesson to teach about the consequences of underestimating the human capacity for mathematical justice. The Galactic Empire's final error was about to become their last error.